question.
Hi, my name is Meagan McCall, and I've been asked to be your knitting instructor through this program. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to share this craft with you all. It's something that is one of my passions. It's very relaxing. It can be after you get used to it. It can be frustrating too, but it's something that is just gives you a lot of freedom and expression and creativity. And I hope that you all signed up for this find that to be true as well. I've been knitting for I think about 12 years now, and I learned as an adult. And it was just one of those things that once I started, I couldn't stop. For a while, I was a knitting instructor at Joann's Fabric here in town, and so it was a pleasure to be able to teach beginners the craft. And it's a privilege and a pleasure to be here to share this with you this summer. One of the things that I want to show you are our basic tools. So I've brought some of my knitting needles just to show you the variations. We've got aluminum needles here that are quite long. I've got some bamboo needles here that are round and skinny. These are size 4, so see, these are some of the smaller end of the knitting needle tools. And then I've got these guys, and they're actually square, and these are also bamboo, but these are size 11, so these are on the bigger end. So for your bigger yarns, you're going to be using a size 11, or for your smaller yarns, you can use a size 11 and get kind of a lacy look to it. It'll make the stitches bigger, and it'll give some flow to your fabric, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. If you're signed up for this program, you should have received from the library a kit that looks like this. So I'm just going to look in and see what we have in here. We have a beautiful orange Brava worsted weight yarn. So worsted weight is kind of your medium weight, size 4. This is an acrylic yarn, so it's going to have some stretch, and it's kind of in between a really thick and chunky yarn. So this is kind of a thick yarn here, and one of the really thin yarns, which I have over here. So I have a really thin yarn here and a thick yarn here, and this Brava is going to be right in between. So we're going to use our aluminum needles. These guys are a size 9, so that'll be good. And on the back of your knitting yarn, it should tell you what size needle. So this does a number 7 to a number 8, or a crochet hook I through K. So we have a 9, which is good. It'll be great for learning to knit because you'll feel like you have something in your hand, and it'll be good to control. Okay, so we're gonna get into the basics. Again, I'm so excited for you all to learn this craft, and the possibilities of what you can create are really just up to you and what you want to do. You can do hats, you can do scarves, you can do necklaces, bracelets, you can do headbands. It's really, eventually you can get into clothes and do sweaters and shirts, or even bags, however you want to take it. I just hope that this journey is one that is a lifetime full of creativity and expression for you all. And thank you for joining us, and we'll get started now with the basics. Okay, so now we're going to learn how to purl. So in the last video, you learned how to cast on and butterfly your tail up. I'm using bigger needles, and these are bamboo, and we're going to learn how to purl. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to, instead of sticking your needle in this way to knit, you're actually going to come in, bring it through the front the opposite way. So you're going to come in from right to left and go in, and then you're going to throw your work around the front, and you're going to pull it through to the back. And then I'm going to scooch these guys up and knock it off with my thumb there. So you're going to see the bump in the front, okay? And that's called purling. And I'm going to go ahead and get my tail out of the way there. So again, we're going to come in through the front here, okay? So when we were knitting, we were going in that way. we're going to come in through the front, and we're going to make sure our yarn's in the front. Okay, so our yarn is up front here. Stick our needle in like that. We're going to throw it around, pull that out into the back, and then push it off. So again, and this time we're going to go counterclockwise here. Throw our yarn counterclockwise, and we should be getting these beautiful pearls, and we're going to purl that to the end. And this is important because in the last video I showed you my swatch with the stockinette, and you're going to need to know how to do both the knit and the purl stitches if you want to create a fabric that's stockinette. And we can slide that back over here so you guys can see. Here's the stockinette stitch. So this is when we've knitted the first row, then we've turned it over, and then we've purled, and then we've knit, purled. So we have this consistent. It is kind of it likes to curl up on the edges there a little bit. As opposed to the lay flat of the stockinette. Here, the knit, or the garter stitch, the stockinette likes to roll a little there. So that's the difference. So this is, you'll need to know both the knit and the purl for this. This is a rib stitch, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm going to actually show you how to do a rib pattern, and that's going to use knit and purl stitches on the same row. So you can kind of see the purls in between those two knit stitches, but we'll get to that later. Back to our purling. Okay, we're going to stick that in from the right. We're going to come in through the right side to the left, go counterclockwise, throw that around tight so you get your loop in the back. So this might be a little awkward, especially if you have been practicing knit. You're going to be doing things a little bit different. So you can really sit with this. Make sure that your yarn is in the front. When you're knitting, it's in the back. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But you should be seeing these beautiful bumps here along the back. And then if you flip it over, you should be able to see your knit stitches. So the reverse of a purl stitch is a knit. So that should be, and also the same goes for if you set down your work and you don't know what to do, like you don't remember what you're doing and you thought, you know, oh, whatever, it's going to be coming out of the working yarn is going to be coming out of the last stitch that you knitted or purled. So you'll know that that was a complete stitch, and it's kind of hard. I hope you're seeing that going around. Got that loop in the back, purl, and I'm using my thumb to kind of throw that off because I'm going slow. Got a little bit bigger needles this time. Throw it around and over and in between so you've got your loop in the back and you're knocking it off the front instead of knocking it off back. Okay, and this, you're purling. This is kind of going to feel like you're really throwing, like you're going over and around more than when you were throwing with the knit stitch. Okay, and that would be the purl. So if you wanted to continue on and get that stockinette stitch, now when you turn it over, you would knit. So you would do what you see. So I see knit stitches, so I'm going to knit this row. And then when I flip it over, I'll see purls, so I'm going to purl the next row. So that way you kind of do what you see in front of you, and that will keep it consistent, and you'll have that nice uniform stitch there. Okay, so that is the purl stitch. Now I'm going to talk to you about doing a rib pattern. So when I am doing this swatch, I cast it on 21 because I'm going to knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1, knit 2, purl 1. And so I did it in multiples of 3. Okay, so we're gonna get started. So I'm gonna knit this first stitch, okay? And I threw it behind me there. So my yarn's in back, knit. Now, I've knitted 2. Now I want to purl this next stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my working yarn up in between, bring it to the front. And then I'm going to stick, instead of going in this way, I'm going to stick it in this way, the needle in that way. Throw around counterclockwise, purl. Okay, and then I'm going to switch my yarn back to the back. So now you can see knit, knit, purl. Now I'm going to knit these 2 again. And I'm back, I've knitted 2. And then I'm going to pull my yarn in between to the front and I'm going to purl. So I'm going to throw it around. And then I'm going to move that yarn to the back so I can see my purl stitch. And then I'm going to keep knitting. And so this is knit 2, purl 1 rib that will give you a rib stitch is a nice edging to a scarf. It's used a lot for cuffs on sweaters. So I'm going to purl. So I'm going to bring that back through. I've knitted 2, purl. It's used for textures, and it's just a nice, neat looking thing. And you can do any combination. You can do knit 3, purl 2. You can do any combination of rib stitch that you want. Just make sure that you're casting on enough for that to even out. So I'm going to purl. I'm going to finish this to the end so that you guys can see what it looks like, and then I'll pan over to my swatch so that you can kind of see what several rows of this knit 2, purl 1 rib will look like from the front and the back. If you continued on, and actually in this one I ended on a purl stitch, which isn't always advisable, so you can cast on 20, and that will give you a nice even ending like this. So I have 2, knit 2, purl. So when I flip it over on the next row, I'm going to be purling 2, knitting 1, purling 2, knitting 1. We are going to get started on our advanced knitting video. So this is for those of you that feel very confident with the knitting, the casting on, the knitting, the purling, and the binding off. We're going to start with making a bracelet. And we're going to just start, I'm going to start by, again, with my slip knot. So the slip knot is made by making a loop and then another loop. And there's lots of ways to make the slip knot, but this is just how I've always done it. And then putting this one through that one and pulling it. Okay. And then we're going to, I'm using a smaller needle, as you can see, and a cotton yarn, so we can see our stitches very well. It's cotton, which is a good choice for anything that you're going to be wearing because it's washable. And anyway, so we're gonna start with just casting on 3 stitches. So your slip knot is the first stitch. We're gonna just do the long tail cast on method, which we learned in our first video. And we're gonna cast on another one and then one more. So that makes 3. So that counts as our first row. So this is row 1. Here's our tail, here's our working yarn. Okay, we're gonna get our tail out of the way, have our working yarn there, and now we're going to knit this first row. So this will count as our second row. Okay. You got to be careful with cotton, likes to split because it's spun kind of loose and the fibers don't really get too connected to each other like some polyester blends. So you got to be careful splitting your yarn, which I think happened to me on that first stitch there. Okay, so we have knit 2 rows. Now we're going to work on an increase, okay? This is the most common increase. It's called knitting 1 front and back. So if you're looking at a pattern, it says K1, B1, and that means knit 1 front and back, or it may be K1, FB1. So knit 1 front and back, okay? So I'm going to just act like I'm knitting, okay? But instead of taking that loop off, I'm going to actually pull it up a little bit. Hopefully you can see it like that. It's okay if it looks stretchy. And then I'm going to go in the back loop like that. I'm going to wrap the yarn around counterclockwise. I'm going to pull it up like that. And now I'm going to knock it off. And there I have a knit, so you can see the V there, and a bar that looks kind of like a purl. And now I have 2 stitches, so I've successfully created 1 stitch. And then I'm going to knit this one regularly, okay? And then I'm going to knit 1 front and back here, so I'm going to stick it in the front like I'm knitting, but instead of taking it off, I'm going to pull that up. Instead of taking it off the needle right now, I'm just going to pull that up, make it a little loose, go in through the back loop, wrap it around counterclockwise, pull it through and let it go. So now I should have 5 stitches, okay? We're going to knit this row to make it even out a little bit, make those stitches a little tighter that we created. So knit all of them. We're going to, when you knit every row, remember it's called a garter stitch. So we'll be working in the garter stitch for these couple of rows. Okay, just totally knitting right now. Nothing too crazy. So we see all of our knit stitches there. We see the purl stitches from the last one, okay? So this is our first row down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is our 5th row right here. So I'm gonna switch. We're gonna increase again, and this will be the last increase that we do right now for this pattern, for this specific pattern. So we're going to knit 1 in the front, pull it up, go in through the back, knit. Okay, so now we have our knit stitch and a bar, and then we're going to knit these 3 in the middle here. Just knitting, nothing tricky about that, just knitting. These 3. And now in this last one, we're going to increase again. This will be our last increase. Knit. Don't take it off just yet. Go in through that back row there, that back loop. Okay, and now we have successfully created 7 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, and that looks a little weird, and it's okay. We're going to go ahead and knit this next row to kind of even that out a little bit. Okay? So just knit every single row, and then we're going to get into a different pattern that I like to use a lot. It's easy for beginners because if you know how to knit and purl, you can do this pattern just like the rib stitch. If you know how to knit and purl, like we talked in the second video, you can do this next pattern stitch that I'm getting ready to introduce to you. But right now we're just knitting and garter. We're just knitting every single row because that will give us a nice flat fabric. As we talked about in the other video, stockinette stitch, where you knit 1 row, purl 1 row to get that consistent look. It kind of curls on the edges, but for this we want it to lay flat. Okay, so And there we are. We have 7 stitches, okay? And it looks like a triangle. We don't want to increase too fast and do knit 1 front and back every single row because that would make it look disproportionate at the end of it. At the end of the project, when it kind of levels out, it would look just really kind of weird. So that's why we knit those rows in between. And you can see here in the fabric where we increased, you can see the bars there, but it's not too noticeable. So now we're going to start a seed stitch. We're going to knit the first stitch, okay? So yarns in back, going around counterclockwise, pulling it up, and we're just knocking it off like normal. But now we're going to put our yarn in the front like we're going to purl, because we are going to purl. Put our needle through the front there, okay? Wrap it around. Pull that loop up, knock it off. We successfully did it because we're working yarns now off this, out of that purl. We're going to put it back in between. We want our yarn in the back because now we're going to knit the next stitch. And now we're going to bring our yarn back between, we're going to purl. So we're doing a repetitious pattern of knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. Okay? So I purled that one, put it back through. Going to knit this one, bring it up, we're going to purl the next one, put it in between to the back, knit the last one. It's always a good idea when you're doing a seed stitch or stockinette stitch to knit the ends anyways, because that'll make the ends nice and tidy and lay flat and not get twisty. So we're going to flip it over. I see a purl from the last stitch that I knitted. I see a purl. So we're going to knit that purl. So seed stitches, the seed stitch is just a series of knitting the purls and purling the knits. So now we're going to purl this. This is a knit stitch, so I'm going to purl that stitch. And it really creates this beautiful, like, ladder type looking, so there's a purl, so I'm going to knit it. Fabric that just has these little seeds dropped in there. Okay, we're going to purl the next one, because that's a knit stitch. We're going to purl it. Knitted that purl, bring it back through. We're going to purl this knit stitch, and then we're going to end on a knit. So put it behind. That's a purl. Going to knit it. Okay. And then, so then we kind of see that knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. Okay, we're going to flip. So now on the opposite, I see a purl, so I'm going to knit it. I'm going to knit that purl. And then I'm going to purl that knit stitch. It's really good. This really is advanced because you really have to be confident in holding your needles while you move this tail back and forth. Okay, so we're back. And I've gotten some length on my cuff here. Of course, it's not going to go all the way around just yet because now we're going to start working on our decrease. So I've done the pattern, and as you can see, I've done the seed stitch. So this is kind of what it looks like after you've gone at it for a while. And so now I'm going to just start knitting every row. So this last row that I did was a seed stitch, knit. On the back, it's knit, purl, knit, purl. So instead of knitting this purl, I'm just going to knit every single stitch. So we're just going to start knitting. we're still working with our 7 stitches here, so okay, so again, this is just me working on the cuff. Once you've reached the desired length of your project, then you can start this decrease. This is, so there you see we've knitted every single row. So now we're going to switch, and this is the row that we're going to start decreasing, and we've switched from seed stitch to garter stitch. So now this one is called knit 2 together. So we're going to stick our needle in through 2 stitches loops, just like we would knit this one. We're going to actually just do that 2. We're going to wrap our yarn around, and this is the part that gets kind of tricky, because you have to pull you have to pull that loop up under both of those stitches and then knock them both off. And then we're going to knit to the end, to the last stitch here. So again, now we're in garter stitch, no purling anymore, just plain knitting. Oops. Okay. So I'm glad that happened. I can show you how to tink. Tink is a term used to unknit. It's the word knit backwards. So we're going to tink here. I'm going to stick it in, stick my needle back in through that underneath that loop there that I just knitted, and pull that off because we're going to knit these 2 together. So you knit 3. Now we're going to put these through these 2 loops and around, pull it up and knock them off. So now we're back down to 5. And so we're going to knit that row. Just knitting, no decreases, no purling, just knitting. And then the next row we'll start our decrease again. Okay, so there you go. You see we're getting back into the garter stitch. So now we're going to flip it over and we're going to knit these 2 together. And then we're going to knit 1. So knit 2 together, knit 1, knit 2 together. Okay, so we're going to stick those in like that. And now we're going to knit these last 2 together, and so we'll have 3. And if you knit real tight, like I tend to do, that's called your tension. So your tension, how loose or tight you knit is called your tension. And so that is going to be an indicator of how easy or difficult it will be for you to do those decreases. Tension will get more consistent over time. It's just really, the more you practice with holding your needles and getting familiar and comfortable and getting a rhythm in knitting and purling, the better your tension's going to be. Okay, so now we're just going to knit this row again, and then we're going to start our binding off process, which from our last video, if you'll remember, it's not too difficult. Okay, so there, look, we have like that triangle, and this is going to be kind of a tight cuff, and then we're going to finish it off with sewing on a button. Okay, so now we're ready to bind off. So what we're going to do is we're going to knit the first stitch, and then we're going to be done with our working yarn for now. and we're going to just slip that middle stitch onto this needle. We're going to take this needle in our left hand, and we're going to slip this first loop over the second one, pull it tight, and then we're going to stick this last loop on and pull it tight. And there, we have successfully binded off our project. So now we're just going to, I'm going to grab my button and my yarn needle, and we're going to finish up this project.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching that video. If you are interested in brushing up on some basic knitting fundamentals, we have another beginner knitting video that you can check out, and I'll link that in the description down below. Don't forget to log all of your minutes that you've been reading this summer in our Read Squared app. The summer reading club is almost done, so you want to make sure that you log all of the reading that you've been doing this summer so you can win some grand prizes. Thank you so much for watching again, and happy summer reading. Bye!